So as I was saying, don't get distracted. We got to get through all this today. So as I was saying, the people of France were actually pretty glad he was dead. He did a lot of bad things for the common people of France. That's one of the things you'll see a lot whenever you have a leader who is sort of famous. Oftentimes, it's not because they were good leaders, because they were very good at making themselves appear powerful and wealthy and things like that. And that's usually at the expense of their people. So, for instance, Louis fought a ton of wars, and basically, who's fighting those wars? Who's the common soldiers? Well, by this point, with the introduction of foot soldiers, it's commoners. It's your poorest people. And frankly, they're dying in wars, and they don't really see much benefit out of it. In fact, neither did the crown. A great example, that's the War of Spanish Succession. Basically, what that came right down to is you winning the war, but what you won was basically having to promise that you wouldn't do what you weren't going to do anyways. So it ends up being basically a colossal cost of both money and people, and really serving no real purpose. He also revolted at the Edict of Nantes, which is going to continue this religious conflict in France for quite a number of years yet. So in a way, if you look at Louis, he's sort of a mixed bag. On one end of the spectrum, he's a success. Under his reign, France becomes the power in Europe. But he's also an abysmal failure, because he put the country so far into debt that golden age of France is going to be rather short-lived as it goes through a bloody revolution, and the monarchy completely overthrown. So ultimately, it's sort of a mixed bag. That's the important thing to take from Louis. And as we're going to see, things are not going to go so well for his dynasty in the next 100 years or so. Right, so a new section. This is sort of Chapter 5, Sections 3 and 4 combined, dealing with Austria and Prussia. Now, one thing I want to get into your minds and have you guys think about is Prussia is not Russia. They're two distinctly different places. Russia, of course, you guys know, the interesting combination of European and Asian culture. Different place. Prussia is a state in Germany. So basically, Prussia equals Germany. That's what I want you guys to consider. Savvy? Got it? Lovely.
What section is this?
I believe this is 3 and 4, chapter 5. Now you'll also notice a change in the notes. Look how much more words. That's something you guys have to deal with, because this is not saying you should write more. You should still be writing the same amount of stuff in your notebooks to keep up. Because basically, from this point on, I'm going to go as fast as I want to go, and you have until I switch the slide. It's up to you to keep up. Now, if you're writing every single word, you're probably going to have a lot of trouble keeping up. So you can do one of two things. Either you can try desperately to write every word as fast as possible, and you might get it. You might have to fill in the blanks with videos, or do the sensible thing and cut out the stuff we don't need. Half of these words are irrelevant and can be left off of here. But it's figuring those words out that's the tricky part. So let's analyze the first sentence. Because in truth, actually, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but this is only one paragraph, really written. It's just spread out. It's one sentence, two sentences, three sentences, 4 and 5. So, the first sentence, by the early 1600s, the Holy Roman Empire was really a collection of smaller independent states acting for their own good. How could we summarize that into a smaller amount of space? Yeah.
the Holy Roman Empire was had independent states?
Sure. That's a good summary. As you know, I'm not asking you guys dates, so you're really going to record that. Roman Empire, basically what that says is the Holy Roman Empire was small. That's basically what that says. Yeah, independent states. That's a good way of phrasing it. Second sentence, the Holy Roman Empire was further divided on the basis of religion. Protestants ruled the north, whereas Catholics were in control of the south. How can we summarize that in a very small amount of space? Yeah.
The Holy Roman Empire was divided on the basis of religion.
I think it's smaller than that. You know how I would write this? Protestants north, Catholics south. That's it. That's the whole point of that sentence. Third sentence. May 1618, Ferdinand, the Catholic Habsburg King of Bohemia, was attempting to suppress Protestant uprising and assert his power over the nobles. The Protestants revolt. Ferdinand, Habsburg King, tries to suppress it. Something to that effect. The Habsburg family was the dynasty of the Holy Roman Empire. Yes. And what happened was the Protestants were revolting in the city of Prague, actually all of Bohemia. And so the Catholic king wanted to stop that from happening, sensibly, so he began cracking down on their powers. And in response, so there was a meeting of these Protestants and these Catholics in the city of Prague. And whilst there, the Protestants were asking, all right, what exactly is it that the king wants? And so they read this long letter, and it's pretty upsetting to Protestants. So they end up asking these four officials of the king, who wrote this letter? Because this doesn't sound like the king. This sounds like somebody else, kind of taking some words out of his mouth. And they ended up finding it was two guys. They said, well, do whatever you want because, you know, we're the king's men, yada, yada, yada. And so the Protestants throw them out a window. Yeah, third floor window, they hucked him out of the window. I can imagine like that happening, just like, you know, me, it's like, right, we just like, whoop, and out you go. They actually survived. I, for years, thought they had died, but apparently not. Apparently there's been propaganda that occurred after the fact where the Catholics were saying, you see the heretic Protestants threw the king's men out the window and they were saved by angels. The Protestants had a different story. They said that there was a giant pile of donkey poo at the bottom of the window that they landed in and cushioned their fall, which is pretty gross. Don't really know what's true, but they did survive, and this causes a conflict as a war breaks out because the Catholics are going to try to suppress this Protestant revolution, and the Protestants are going to bring in allies from other countries as well, which creates basically a world war. So that's the thing is that these wars that we're talking about of religion aren't just limited to the mainland Europe. It's occurring all over the world in various colonies, things like that. So it really is, in a way, a world war. But this is a wood cut. It's actually in your book, too, of these guys getting out of the window. And, again, they did survive. And the building is still there. So you, too, can see where guys were hooked out a window. I just think it's funny there's actually a word for people getting chucked out a window, which is demonstration. So this brings us to a little timeline. I'm going to speak by Marty. The conflict we're talking about is the 30 Years' War. So if we were going to sort of show this as a timeline, we start with the Defenstration of Prague. That's what this incident is called. Believe it or not, there was actually two demonstrations of Prague. One of them happened in the 1400s. So the demonstration of Prague begins what's known as the 30 Years' War. So basically what's going to happen is the Catholics are going to bring in their Catholic allies, so France, Spain, Poland, and the Protestants are going to bring in their allies, which includes like England, the Netherlands, etc., and they're going to fight a war. Now, what initially starts as a religious war pretty quickly turns into a much more devastating conflict. You see, what starts as a religious war evolves into one of politics, where you're going to have various groups getting people to side with them, not based upon religion, but based upon land control. Because if you think about it, if you were to kind of slice Europe in half, the northern half is pretty much going to be Protestant, and the southern half is pretty much going to be Catholic. And so that means that your next door neighbors, generally the people you fight the most, because you're basically kind of claiming each other's land, are of the same religion as you. And so they kind of pull a Bayezid on this. They start getting people from other religions to fight for them, so like recruiting Protestants to fight the Protestants, things like that, or rather, Protestants getting Catholics to fight each other, and trying to expand their empires. And the war is going to be incredibly devastating because also there's going to be a shift away from this sort of noble intentions of war, which is basically stealing land. You see, here's the thing. If you're engaging in war at this century, the assumption is that whenever the war is over, the winner is going to be able to make certain demands of the loser. Usually they have to cede certain amounts of territory. They have to give up certain bits of land. And so this kind of ceding of land makes it so that you kind of want your army to not destroy too much stuff. If they're going into a place and they're fighting, yeah, by all means, stay alive, kill the enemy soldiers, but don't go for instance, murder everybody in a town or steal everything that's not nailed down, or most importantly, don't damage the real estate. Don't hurt the cities and things like that, because hopefully you're going to get some of those cities and you don't want to destroy them too much. But here's the problem. The war is so deadly, is so problematic, it's so large, that there's not enough men in the military to fight it all. And so what happens is they start recruiting mercenaries to fight. Now, you guys know what a mercenary is? Okay. You know what a soldier is, yeah? All right, whenever you become a soldier, for instance, if you join the U.S. Army, you swear your allegiance to the United States. That you are going to defend this country against all enemies, whether they be born in foreign countries or from within the United States itself. Okay? Mercenaries swear no such loyalty. The way that they behave is basically as a business. They sell their services as soldiers. Any country willing to pay their price, they will fight for, regardless of what their intentions are, things like that. So that means they will basically go to whoever is the highest paying person. They do not care about nationality. A lot of times what happened was you'd have mercenary companies come out of groups of soldiers who were either deserters, to play the battle, or in some cases were soldiers of other countries who were just trying to make some extra money. Now here's the problem. Mercenaries, as we established, are not part of any particular country's army. So they don't really care about real estate. They care about money. And sometimes these European powers would hire mercenaries but not actually be able to pay them. So the mercenaries would then go on a killing spree and basically try to pay themselves by stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. And they actually depopulated whole villages and killed everybody in it. So the amount of devastation leveled by this was catastrophic. And actually what happened after the war was a famine. because the battlefields are farms. You know, the guys out going fighting are often dudes, and so a lot of the farmlands in Europe were basically going unplowed and untended, and so there's a lack of food. So the 30 Years' War was terribly costly in the long run. And ultimately, it's going to change Europe in quite a few ways. The first thing we can break apart is who wins and who loses. Well, first of all, the war ends in 1648 as what's known as the Peace of Westphalia. You see, whenever you have one of these multi-group wars, you can't just sign a peace treaty and be done with it because there's too many people at war. For instance, at the end of World War II, the United States didn't just sign a peace treaty with, like, the Axis powers. We had to sign it with Germany, we had to sign it with Italy, we had to sign it with Japan, we had to sign it with all these different people at the same time. Everybody else did too. So we just all signed these massive amounts of peace treaties, and collectively it's known as the peace. This particular case is the Peace of Westphalia. So again, if we look at this as a timeline, you'll see on the left-hand side of the board, we have the beginning of the war. What starts it is the demonstration of Prague, then the 30 Years' War happens, and at the end we have the Peace of Westphalia. So that's a little graphic organizer for you guys to use. So who wins? The French. The French come out ahead of this war. They gain the most territory, and they're the best off after it. The Habsburgs kind of lose. Now, they're not destroyed yet. They're still a power, but they lose a lot of it. In fact, the Holy Roman Empire, after the 30 Years' War, is going to be in a bad way. It's still going to linger on. It's still going to have some influence, but not nearly so much as it had before. The final nail of the coffin is actually going to come with Napoleon. You're going to find that in the 1700s, people were rather critical of the Holy Roman Empire. Have you guys ever heard of a guy named Voltaire? He was a writer during the 1700s. Part of this anyway. He was famous for saying that by this point in history, the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman, because it was basically German. But as we're going to see, Germany is really the big loser in the 30 Years' War. Germany ends up fragmenting, breaking apart into 360 different countries. Now think about that for just a second. Germany is not that big as a location. If you were to look at it from a sort of a modern representation of Europe, which isn't really the best, but it still gives you kind of an idea. You know, Germany is actually fairly small. To put it onto a global scale, all right, let's see. Germany is about the size of, maybe about like half of Texas, something like that. So imagine Texas, just for the sake of argument, were to split up into 360 different states. How big would each one of those be? Yeah, it'd be like the size of a town. Like Dallas would be its own country, you know? And it's like, this is what happens. So they are going to be incredibly weak for the next 200 years or so, until they're reunified. But this map shows some of the campaigns going on. You guys remember that video I showed you with the guys with the pikes in Spania? The Battle of Croix? Say that? That's that one right here. C-43. You'll notice throughout here, the red represents the Protestant victories, whereas the blue represents the Catholic victories. You notice it's kind of all spread out here. The central area is mostly the Catholic victories. You also notice the timeline here over the years. And really this is going to see the decline of Spain. As you pointed out, France comes out the best at the end of the war. Spain going into it, man, they had a lot of power and wealth and prosperity. You know, they come off this golden age of Philip II. The Spanish tercio was basically undefeated on the battlefield. But from this point on, they're going to go, it's going to be kind of the end for them. This shows a map after Westphalia, and you'll see the little red border, it kind of comes throughout here, throughout Austria. That actually signifies the Holy Roman Empire section. And man, look at how messed up Germany looks. Now this area is typically part of Spain. We've got this area over here, which is Prussia, and that's significant. Prussia's going to, despite Germany being kind of like messed up, Prussia remains a very potent place. It's got a very, very strong military. Like it's threatening everybody else type of strength. And so we'll just keep watching them. Austria comes out pretty well. And then the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, they're going to have quite a few issues, as we're going to see, because of Russia and Austria and Prussia. Basically, here in the next few years, Poland's going to cease to exist. But ultimately, again, you can kind of see how the political situation's been stabilized. This is actually a museum model situation, showing the Tercio again. Remember that video we watched? It's kind of the same setup. It's just kind of a reminder. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about. All right, so one of the big issues after the 30 Years' War is the Habsburgs are actually going to add some territory afterwards, and like I said, they're going to remain as an issue. But the biggest problem that the Holy Roman Empire faces is actually cultural. You see, sometimes I tend to think that we don't quite remember the fact that Europe is a very diverse place. There's a lot of different cultures present there. It's not just white people. And that meant that whenever you have an empire that stretches across multiple different cultures, how do you make that so that everyone has the same sense of identity? How do you have one culture when everybody is pretty well divided? And so this was a major question, a major difficulty for the Europeans to sort of work out, especially in the multicultural empires. So what they did was kind of genius, really, is that they spread them out amongst other places. They diversified, encouraged people to move, especially getting folks that were Germanic to move into the eastern part of Europe and Slavs in the western part, and sort of disseminate the culture. The idea being that they would be less inclined to rebel if they saw themselves more as being Holy Roman than as being, Slavic or Germanic or whatever. Sort of like what Genghis Khan did to sort of break up the feuding that occurred with the Mongols. The other thing is they never organized a centralized government. And this is one of the main problems, is that they organized it in a way that made sense at the time, admittedly. Basically what a centralized government, what we're talking about, is the government wasn't organized in a strong way from within the capital. Rather, each territory sort of had autonomy to decide for themselves, which was good in one respect because it allowed the people to be ruled by basically their own people. However, the problem with that is that it failed to unify the consensus purpose. Again, they wanted to break free and form their own little nations, which brings the idea of nationalism to the forefront. Nationalism, as we're going to see, is a force of mind. It's pride in one's nation, which is an interesting word, because we sometimes use the word nation to mean country, or even states, which are different things entirely. Nation has to do with one's cultural identity. Nation has to do with one's idea about who they are and where they're from. It could be considered like super patriotism to some extent, because it's pride in where one comes from, but it really is less to do with one's country of origin, more about one's culture. So my culture for itself and better than all other cultures and pride and that sort of thing. The problem with that is that it encourages people to be aggressive and combative. In some cases, it's harmless. Like, for instance, you want to see a great example of nationalism? Watch the Olympics. It's funny because I really enjoy watching the Olympics. We record it all, things like that. And it's like, I don't even care what sport it is. If America's participating in it, I'm going to watch it. So it's like, you know, you're watching some really weird sports like badminton. And it's just kind of like, you know, have you ever watched like an Olympic badminton? Yeah, that's the thing, Olympic badminton. It's like intense. It's like, if you guys have ever watched Olympic ping pong. Like seriously, watch YouTube videos. Them dudes are like, you know, they're all over. But anyway, like how everyone's like, yeah, USA, that's nationalism. That's a weak nationalism because it's really just like encouraging the person to hit the ball over the line and not say kill everyone of another nation because the world will be better without them. See what I'm saying? It's a spectrum, but the end of the spectrum can be really bad and dangerous. And that's, of course, that's existing in Europe after this. We also have the idea of the balance of power, which is that we want everybody to be equal in terms of how much military and political and financial strength they have. Because if one power gets a little bit too much power, well, then they might conquer Europe. And so there's that worry as well. These are two mutually exclusive forces. Because balance of power is like, hey, we want everybody to be equal in terms of power so that no one gets the advantage and no one can cause wars and things like that. And then there's the other side of things, which is nationalistic, which is I want my nation to be me, to be more powerful than everybody else's, which is the exact opposite of this thing. So it doesn't quite work out the way that we're maybe necessarily wanting, and things aren't going to go so hot. Which brings us to the next point, Austria. You might remember I was talking to you guys about what happens when a woman gains the throne. That exactly the same thing happens to Maria Theresa, who is the daughter of Charles VI. So, what happens? Her subjects did not like her, let me put it that way. They call her all sorts of names which I will not repeat because of polite company, and did not want to help her. And there was a lot of people eyeballing her state, like, I'm going to get me some of that, yum. Prussia being one of them. Prussia's like, we're just going to conquer Austria. You know, so she ends up gathering all these kind of unruly, disobedient lords into one place and is going to have a talking to them. Right? So these guys roll in, and they're like, who's this, you know, to tell me what I can and can't do, you know, things like that. They're not nice to her. And so she starts speaking to them. And she talks to them. And by the end of the talk, those same men are clambering over each other, almost fighting with each other to see who can kneel to her and give them their obedience first. That's persuasiveness. You know, she is able to convince these guys to go out and fight the wars for her because she can't do it herself. Now, this isn't necessarily a sexist thing. Like, it's not so much that she couldn't hypothetically do it, accepting the fact that she has no experience with it. Because consider this, that was considered a masculine art. Women did not participate in masculine arts. Men did not participate in feminine arts. This is how society was stratified. So this meant that she had no business leading armies because she didn't know anything. That'd be like me taking one of you guys like, all right, here's, 5,000 men of the Spanish Tercio, go lead them to victory. It's like, hypothetically, yeah, you might be able to do it, but, there's all kinds of problems with that. So she is able to lead in another way, not by taking the battlefield herself, but by getting someone else who is loyal to do it for her, but she had to make him loyal first, you see. So, again, she is able to do what is not possible, and does some pretty cool stuff. So she's a cool lady. Frederick II, we're going to talk about later. He's the king of Prussia. And as I said, she ends up getting these vassal states to back her up. She does lose the province of Silesia, but keeps everything else and strengthens the bureaucracy and government kingdom. Now that's going to help Austria in years coming. Austria is going to emerge as a very powerful state as well. And largely it's because of her. She ends up doing quite a few things to help increase the power of the state, including working out a deal with Prussia. I believe it was her. I could be wrong. I believe it was her. It was Catherine the Great, and I think it was Frederick the First, I believe, who was the leaders in this breaking up of Poland. So she's kind of an important, powerful lady. But moving to Prussia for a second. So Prussia began to emerge as a powerful Protestant nation, in opposite of Austria, because, again, they were same territory. However, the folks that really came to control much of Germany was a dynasty called the Hohenzollern. Is how I've been told to pronounce that, Hohenzollern. I always heard Hohenstaufen, but it's that silly way of pronouncing German words. That's sort of family, Hohenzollern. And they are going to start picking apart the smaller kingdoms that make up Germany and start putting together a more unified Germany. Eventually, this is the 19th century, they are going to finish unifying Germany into what we think of as Germany. And actually, a little bit more than that, because they also control parts of Austria and other places as well. But still. And so that begins this process of creating a state, So finishing up, Frederick William I was able to use his army incredibly effectively. He ends up winning the support of the Junkers, which were basically a word for nobility. And they're able to give away positions in the government and the military. Basically, he began this process by encouraging people into state service. Instead of fighting against the state, they become part of the state. And they will enrich themselves by the success of the state. So he is a conqueror. But he wants to pass on this process in the 1740s to his son, who becomes known as Frederick Wilhelm II. The problem, though, is Frederick Wilhelm doesn't really want to do that. He actually, I forget exactly what he wanted to do, but basically he was he didn't like fighting, he didn't like war. And so, like, his dad's like, if you're going to become a soldier, he's like, Dad, I want to be a painter instead. You're not going to be a painter. Things. And so they had to fight. It was actually such a bad situation that Frederick William, when he was young, this is the second, fled the capital and tried to basically run away from home with the help of a family friend. Well, it didn't go very well because he was captured by his father and brought back to his rooms. And so he was set down in a chair next to this guy who helped him escape. And Frederick William I comes in and starts talking to him and says, you have to understand, son, that everything in life has a consequence. He takes a knife and slits the other guy's throat in front of him. He says, that's because you tried to escape. Made him watch as he killed his best friend. He never ran away again. So talking about harsh parenting styles, we do. Frederick Wilhelm II, though, goes on to really become a force to be reckoned with. He launched several successful military campaigns, expanding the size and power and influence of Prussia, and because of that, he gains the nickname the Great. So Frederick the Great refers to Frederick Wilhelm II, and ends up adding a lot of territories, including Silesia, as well as parts of what is now Poland, but it wasn't there after that. So what happens is the balance of power becomes really messed up in Europe during this era. Despite competition with Austria and Prussia, France and England, as you have different forces kind of start to rise in power, the others will shift alliances with each other and start kind of fighting against them. So it's constantly a game of cat and mouse to try to see. Well, that's not even really a great example. It's really a lot more like Chutes and Ladders because there's a lot of sliding around. But they're each trying to maintain the balance while also gaining the advantage. So it's sort of two different pressures. On one hand, you have folks trying to go to war to expand their empire. At the same time, they're trying to prevent war to not lose territory. So it's this kind of like manic, almost bipolar view that's going to cause the entire thing to come crashing around behind everybody's ears. Now, I believe that's it. What's that? Sure thing. So I am going to turn the recording down while you guys finish this up, and then those of you guys at home can follow up accordingly.